Hello, my name's Ian Harris. I'm CEO of How To's. A few weeks ago, I was talking to Louisa Owens at Liverpool City College, and we were talking about the plans for myself and some of my colleagues to deliver some live training, albeit online, to their Liverpool City College's team of teaching and learning coaches. And it struck me as we were talking that there was so much going on with the whole COVID thing that I was amazed that they were looking to fit this in. And so I said to Louise, I said, "Look, do you want to press the pause button? We can come back to this at a certain, a later date." And she said something that really struck me, and it's going to form the basis of what I want to talk about this morning. She said, or this afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. She said, "No, we now more than ever we need to start looking at putting the pedagogy back into technology." And that last bit, put the pedagogy back into technology, really hit home with me, and is going to form the basis of what I want to talk about. So a little bit about how-tos, and then I'm going to go back to 1988. So I'm aware that some of the people watching this may not know what how-tos are. So it makes sense that for the rest of this to make sense, you need to know what how-tos are. So how-tos are visual guides to evidence-informed teaching techniques. This is one of around 160 that is now on the app. They set out how specific techniques to use when teaching online and when face-to-face in the classroom, workshop, or work setting. And they're housed on an app that provides the organisation that subscribes with a social learning environment, which teachers, educators. So actually, let's just clear something up. When I say educators, I mean anyone that's in a teaching role. So that could be a teacher, an assessor, a lecturer, an endpoint assessor, a trainer, you name it. Anyone that's in a teaching role, I'm going to call them an educator. In fact, I may slip into calling them teachers. We're all teachers. So the app provides a social learning environment. Everybody's got a log on. Everybody's got access to this teaching knowledge, if you like, this body of teaching knowledge, these visual guides to evidence-informed teaching techniques. Actually, a nice analogy to imagine would be to think of an aeroplane safety card. And imagine that as a card in a deck of cards. And now imagine 160 cards, each card depicting a teaching technique that you can use online or in the classroom. And you've got the idea of what the content of the app is. And then in terms of the social learning aspect of it, teachers can, at a click of a button, tell each other whether they're considering working on or have already embedded. This isn't rocket science. When your educators get into it, they'll see techniques they're already using. So we've made it really easy for them to tell everybody else what they're doing in their context. And teachers can basically contact each other and share their learning with each other. So that's what I want to say about that at the moment. And then we can come back to that a bit later on. Now I want to go back to 1988, and John Fines was my tutor, Dr. John Fines, unfortunately no longer with us. But he took myself and my peers, I think there were about 10 of us in my little postgrad pod, we might call them a pod now, bubble even, into an empty classroom. And he sat us down and he said something that stayed with me for ever since, obviously. And he said, there's only 4 things that a fly on a wall will ever see happening in your classrooms. Whatever you're teaching, there's only going to be 4 things that happen. He said, and these aren't in any particular order. So when I say first, I don't mean that's the first thing that will happen. I just mean it's the first of 4 things that will happen at some point in your classrooms. He said the first thing that a fly on a wall will see happening is you talking to students. And sometimes, believe me, he said, there will be times when you just need to talk directly to them. you won't expect or want or need a reply. It'll just be direct communication to the students. He said the second thing that a fly on the wall will see is you interacting with students. The third and fourth things will see the students working independent of you. And he stressed that independence didn't mean them working on their own. It would mean that they're independent of me as the teacher. And he said they'll either be doing that on their own, maybe doing it on their own, or they may be doing it in groups of 2, 3, 4, or whatever group size you decide. But they're going to be interacting with each other. And as they're interacting with each other, your job is to decide when you need to dip in and out, when to intervene and support them in working effectively together. And the fourth dynamic, he said, is when the students are working directly with the stimulus. He said either a book or in a practical subject, they might be working with the materials and the equipment in those practical subjects. He said that's it. So no, not a lot of technology around in those days. So that practical working with the stimulus stuff has probably changed quite a lot. But those four dynamics are the four things that you will do. And then he said, your job as a teacher is to orchestrate the class and move between those four dynamics and do it in ways and find ways that ensures that the students are engaged, that they're motivated, and that the learning sticks. And that's it. And he said, so your career as a teacher will be about questioning yourself as to whether or not they are engaged, whether they are motivated, and whether they are learning. And if they aren't, to find ways that you can adapt your teaching inside of those four dynamics by moving between those four dynamics to actually make sure that they are engaged, motivated, and the learning sticks. So what's my point? Well, when Louisa said that we need to start looking at adding the pedagogy back into the technology, after the call, my mind went to where we're at now as a profession, because it seems to me that me and my peers sitting in that classroom, anxious about to embark on teaching our first lessons, could be compared to where we're at now, where we've got ourselves tooled up with Teams or Google Meet or with Zoom or on Canvas or Blackboard, whatever it is, we've got this online learning platform. And when we're online with those students, what a fly on a wall would see happening will be us talking to students, us interacting with students, setting up opportunities for them to interact with each other, and them interacting with a stimulus. So in that sense, we know that there's a comparison to be made. Also that we can compare is, well, how do we do that? So I'm going to come back to that again. And now I want to go and look at the whole point of professional learning, because I've been asked to contribute to today, because today is a professional learning day. So I want to try and pull together some key themes from professional learning and then put those themes from professional learning to the four dynamics that I've just talked about, and then bring us back to the idea of supporting teachers and educators to ensure that students are engaged, motivated, and can learn effectively and remember their learning online. So I want to share another screen with you now. And where is it? Yeah, here we go. So I don't know what professional learning activities you will be engaging in today. Maybe there's workshops, maybe you'll be doing some independent study. I mean, I've got question marks in the box to the right about the types of professional learning. I did a lot of work with Jeff Petty a number of years ago, and Jeff, as you know, many of you will know, talked about the benefit of peer-to-peer learning and supported experiments. Some colleges now and training providers have educators working in what they call learning triads, learning squares even. So, but it doesn't really matter what the professional learning activity is, although it may be useful for you to have one in mind as we go through this. So, bring one to mind as we go through. The purpose of all professional learning, and this isn't me saying this, this is based on the work of, well, Jeff introduced me to this, the work of Joyce and Showers, and then more recently Helen Timperley, is that we want to ensure that the professional learning activity helps us meet the learning needs of the students. So another way of talking about learning need would be to describe that as a barrier to progress. So if our job as a teacher is to ensure that students are engaged, motivated, and remember their learning in the long term, then, by the way, I'm not saying that's all there is to it. I'm just saying that's what I want to focus on this bit in this conversation. If that is the purpose of what we're doing, then for that to happen, we're doing it so that they need to have access to the curriculum, and it's by giving them access to the curriculum that we give them access to future life learning and employment opportunities. And sometimes, as we're delivering or teaching the curriculum, barriers come up that prevent them from getting that access. And so another word for that barrier is a learning need will emerge either with an individual student or within the dynamic of the class as a whole. And our job as educators, as teachers, is to adapt our teaching. Go back to what John Fiennes was saying, is to adapt our teaching within those four dynamics. How can we adapt what we're doing in those four dynamics to make sure that the learners are able to access the content of what we're being taught? So let's just link that into the Education and Training Foundation's work on the dual professional. Pretty much all of the, actually I can't say pretty much, all of the customers, all of the training providers, colleges, universities we work with, all of their educators are experts in what they're teaching. What we're providing is step-by-step visual guides into how to deliver, teach that what. And that is the essence of the dual professional. So that educators become expert in not only what they're teaching, but how they deliver it. And that takes time. Now, in the context of COVID, we've got a situation where teachers that were expert in teaching face-to-face, we already know that put in a situation where they're using Zoom or Teams or whatever, and I know this is a generalization, that expertise isn't transferring. So there's a degree of, noviceness about it, that newness. That's why I wanted to refer to my experience of going into that classroom with John Fiennes and my peers. I got the idea of, how am I going to talk, of talking to, of talking with, of them interacting, but how am I going to do that? But going back to this summary of professional learning activity, we do all of our activities so that we can support our teachers, our educators in developing their practice so that they can ensure the students can access the curriculum. Now, the other thing that's interesting in terms of Timperley's and Joyce and Showers' work and stuff is they talk about the need for all professional learning activities to include a professional learning conversation, also known as a theory of action. And put simply, what that means is what I'm doing at the moment isn't working. I'm getting some results or some kind of situation, some behaviours that I don't want. I need to change. I'm saying that if I change this and try this, I'm going to get a better result. And that, in essence, is what a theory of action is. And that is at least implicit, and we can make it explicit within all professional learning activities. So we head to the model at the bottom. Now, for those of you not using how-tos at the moment, you'll notice that there's no mention of how-tos on that cycle at the bottom. That actually, when it comes to finding a solution at step 2, I'm suggesting that if you are if you have access to the how-tos, then many solutions are available to you on the app. But the first step is to say, well, what's your target? What's the situation that you need to address? Now, if we go back to the COVID thing, we had this massive situation where students were no longer able to attend the classroom, if you like, the live situation. So the solution was Teams, Zoom, Canvas, whatever. And we've had to learn that, and we've got used to all of the features on these things about breakout groups or however that technology works. What I'm suggesting is that knowing how to use that technology does not mean that we're going to engage, motivate, and ensure that the learning sticks. There's another, if you like, another layer to access. What we've done by giving students access to the curriculum through Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're using is we've given them the opportunity to access the curriculum. We haven't ticked the box in terms of, well, are they going to do it? And we know this. We know this for several reasons. One, we know that the dropout rates from online learning far exceed the dropout rates from classroom teaching or face-to-face teaching. And the data varies, but the message is the same, that actually dropout rates are far worse online than they are offline. And this is pre-COVID data. So unless we actually do develop our practice in terms of how to engage, motivate, and to go back to Louise's phrase, add pedagogy to the technology, then I think we're really going to struggle. I mean, so that's what I wanted. That's why I wanted to share that model with you. So just going to go back now to the main screen. So the idea of the how-tos is to support educators in meeting the learning needs of students. And if we go back into the app, we can take a deeper, excuse the phrase, I'm tempted to say it, a deep dive into how the app supports you in doing that. So on that model, we talked about the need for teachers, educators to identify what are the barriers that are preventing the access to the curriculum. And one of the things we've done on the app is we've organised the how-tos by typical barriers to progress. So initially, when we put the app together, we organised them by teaching strategies. Oops. Now notice that a strategy, lots of, it's interesting, I'm in conversations with some teacher training universities at the moment in the States, and a lot of them are looking at strategies at this level, but they don't drill down to a level of precision in terms of what, a concrete example, if you like, of what a strategy actually looks like. What does a fly on a wall actually see happening? So that's one of the things that's pretty unique about the how-tos, is that yes, you can organize techniques by strategy, but strategies don't tick the behavioural box. So as an ex-special needs teacher, we used to talk about, mummy, come and watch me. What do you actually see a teacher doing when they're using a particular technique? And that's what we tried to depict in the how-tos. But the default way of organising the how-tos is by the types of barriers that educators come across. So I'm not going to go through these. I'm just going to scroll through slowly to see if you can connect to a barrier that you can relate to. And then the idea is that once you connect to a barrier that's familiar to you, going back to that learning cycle, you can actually start thinking about, well, how can I actually start meeting those needs? So here we go. And as you go through this, you can see that we've started to integrate online versions of techniques into the main collection. So going back into graphic organisers to demonstrate understanding, you get the step-by-step. And the idea is that teachers, educators can go through this at their own pace whenever they want to. So although it's up to the organisation, you can run workshops and stuff. And then these numbers here, as I said, I don't know of an education system anywhere in the world that doesn't ask teachers to demonstrate how they are reflecting and capturing their own learning. How are they supporting their colleagues in developing their learning? And how are they supporting the learning in the organisation? I remember when I was teaching, I had to fill in forms. I had an appraisal meeting every year. And I was like, why am I doing this? Well, all you've got to do now is click a button. And you are supporting, you are demonstrating your learning, you're making yourself available to your colleagues. Because if I if I wanted to contact my colleague that is considering this, all I've got to do is click a button and send them a note and say, hey, let's work on this together. All of this is hoovered up into the skills exchange, which these numbers are completely arbitrary. So this would have the name of your organisation here, and it would show everybody can see what everybody else is doing. It just coincidentally, this is currently undergoing a massive revamp to make it even easier for teachers, educators to find and support each other. But basically, every organisation has their own private digital space for them to set up and share learning across the organisation. The development of the online how-tos, this started pre-COVID, and it's something else I want to say about how we know that simply giving that actually we've got to start adding the technology back into adding the pedagogy back into the technology. In October 2019, we were approached by an e-textbook provider, and they noticed that the training they were providing the lecturers, primarily in the universities that they sold to, was showing them how to use the highlighting tool, how to use the note-making tool, how to use the bookmark, and so on. But that wasn't resulting in helping the lecturers, the teachers, to integrate the use of the e-textbook technology into the teaching sequence. So we put together some how-tos, as you can see here, looking at how to do that. If you're not a how-to subscriber, use the contact button on the website to get in touch with me, and I'll arrange for you to have a preview so you can have a look at some of these. I mention that because I know that iTransform is a brilliant technique. Why is it brilliant? Well, because it's really easy to set up. It's cognitively sound. Students have to deconstruct and reconstruct. It taps into their skills as a digital native. And do you know what? As a teacher, you can sit back and watch them do the work, which is, given the amount of work that we have to do when teaching online, it's a really nice technique. So a lot of what we've tried to do with the how-tos in terms of the online collection and the e-textbook collection is focus on techniques that show educators how they can move to independent learning activities. We focused on independent learning activities where the students are having to work in groups or at least in pairs. That old adage about, if I'm going to go to the gym, I'm more likely to go to the gym if I'm going there with a peer. And so with the how-tos, we figure that if the teachers are setting up independent learning activities, maybe by flipping the learning, the students are more likely to complete the work and participate in that if we set up paired activities away from the teacher. We've also put a lot of emphasis on trying to reduce the amount of requests from students to teachers for support. So we've looked at ways of integrating student-to-student peer support, and also with entry routines. That's another one I think that's in the preview collection, to basically look at ways of minimizing the unnecessary requests from students to teachers by getting students supporting and working with each other. So that's what else to say. Well, if we just log out for a second, something you may want to look at, if you go to the frequently asked questions section of the website and you go into the professional learning section, there's a whole range of ways. I think there's 9 ways there now to use the how-tos as part of online learning with your teachers. I hope you found that useful. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.